My name is Reesha, and I moved to a secluded cabin in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. I was looking for peace and a new life away from the bustling cities. The Appalachians are so beautiful, covered in dense ancient forest and rolling fog, but there is a primal silence that tourists never experience. The locals have unsettling legends about the whispering white, an ancient entity that mimics human form. I never believed those old dusty tales until one fog Tuesday evening in late November. It was exactly 7:30 p.m. and the sun had already disappeared behind the massive mountain peaks. I was finishing my solo hike on a seldom used trail, known for its twisted trees and deep rock formations. The air was still, and the usual sounds of the forest, bird song, wind in the leaves, had completely vanished. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that made my ears ring. The Appalachian woods have a strange energy at night, as if the entire forest is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The internal park radio on my shoulder, which I usually kept for safety, started to crackle with loud static noise, breaking the oppressive quietness. I picked it up, trying to check in with the main ranger station. Ranger station West, this is Reesha. Can you hear me? I asked, my voice slightly trembling in the fading light. There was no answer, only a faint, distorted stretching sound on the other end. Then a soft female voice whispered my name clearly through the static. Reesha, I see you. A sharp chill ran down my spine, as no other people were in this remote section of the mountains after dark. I grabbed my flashlight and pulled out my service weapon. Feeling a sudden need to investigate, I walked deeper into the thick pines, my footsteps echoing loudly on the dry needle floor. The park's older analog trail cameras followed me as I moved, their little red lights blinking like angry eyes. I looked up at the ceiling of the forest and saw the dark, twisted branches blocking out the sky. As I reached a small clearing, the air became noticeably colder and smelled strongly of ozone and old decay. The towering pine trees were dense and narrow, casting long, distorted shadows on the forest floor. I looked at the small black and white monitor of the motion-activated trail camera mounted on the twisted pine trees near a creek. The footage was grainy and filled with analog noise, looking just like an old VHS tape. I saw a figure standing properly still among the distant trees, facing away. My heart hammered against my ribs as I realized the figure was a woman who looked exactly like me. She had my long hair, my height, and she was wearing my red hiking uniform. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it was just a trick of a low-like and the old document. But when I looked back at the security screen, the woman was still there, staring directly into the camera lens. She slowly raised her hand and pointed toward me. Pure cold terror washed over my entire body as I realized her eyes. Instead of my own brown eyes, they were perfectly entire white. No pupils, no irises, just two pale glowing orbs that reflected the low light in the dark. The whispering white, the ancient mimic of the Appalachian Mountains. It wanted my life, my appearance, but it could not fully mimic the ices. It slowly opened its mouth in an impossibly wide, silent grin, identical to the smile in this image. When I shined my flashlight again toward the location, I did not see the creature at first. Instead, I saw my own reflection in the still water of the creek nearby. But something was very wrong. My reflection was looking back at me with wide, terrified eyes. But behind it stood the pale mimic. I spun around quickly, but the clearing was empty once again. I looked back at the water, and my reflection was finally alone. But the silence in the forest had become deafening. The reflection in the creek water started to ripple independently, reaching its pale, elongated hand toward the surface. I tried to back away, but my feet felt like they were frozen to the muddy ground. I have been waiting for you, Reesha. 1,000 voices whispered from the water in the metallic tone. The surface of the creek began to ripple like thick syrup, and the entity started to crawl out the reflections and into the real world. Its limbs were unnaturally long and thin, and its skin looked like matte, synthetic flesh under the pale moonlight. I finally found the strength to scream, but no sound came out of my dry throat. The mimic was now halfway out of the water, its sharp black claws digging into the soft muddy bank. It had no face, only a smooth grey skin, yet I felt its ancient and the hungry malice directed at me. I realized this thing was a mimic, a predator from the ancient woods that lives within a shadow of the Appalachian Mountains. It wanted to take over my life and leave me in the darkness of the forest forever. I swung my heavy flashlight at the creature's empty face, but it passed right through it like made of thick smoke and shadows. The creature laughed, a sound that was the distorted version of my own laughter, echoing off the canyon walls. I turned and ran back toward the trail, but familiar path had vanished, replaced by dense, unfamiliar pines. The whispering white stood up, its tall, thin body made of matte plastic, like flesh reaching the tops of the trees. It moved with jerky, unnatural steps, like a broken puppet. I scrambled toward a narrow rock crevice, hoping to hide and find a way out onto the main road. Behind me, I could hear the scratching of its long claws against the pine bark. "There is no escape from Appalachian, Reesha," the voice whispered, coming from the every corner of the forest. I grabbed the large rock and threw it at the trail camera, hoping to break the connection. The camera shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces, and for a second, the entire forest went silent. However, the silence did not last long, as every single shard of glass on the forest floor began to glow with pale light. Each tiny piece of the trail camera now showed a small version of the creature's terrifying, wide-eyed face. 1,000 voices started to whisper my name at once, creating a deafening, terrifying noise. The shadow in the clearing began to rise and take a shape of the whispering white. Surrounding me in the circle, I felt cold, invisible hands grabbing my arms. The last thing I remember seeing was a mimic standing over me, looking perfectly human once again. It adjusted its hiking uniform and brushed its hair, looking exactly like me, exactly like the Reesha, who had started the hike that evening. It adjusted its hiking uniform and brushed its hair, looking exactly like the Reesha who had started the hike that evening. It picked up my keys and my radio, moving with a grace that I never had. It looked down at me with its faceless void and whispered, "Thank you for the life." Then everything went black as I was pulled into the cold, empty void behind the shadows. The next morning, the search party found my hiking vehicle empty near the trailhead. They checked the park's analog trail cameras and saw footage of me walking calmly back to the cabin at dawn. The woman on the screen looked normal, but she had a strange, unhinging smile never faded. She waved at the camera and vanished into the crowded mountain community, never to return. The real Reesha was trapped forever in the woods of Appalachia. If you visit the mountains, be careful what you look for in the dark. This is Horrorwink United States. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more horror analog horror stories.